Well, I hope that you've had a good day today. I hope the week has treated you well thus far. If you're sick right now, please let us know about that so we can be praying for you and we can help you in any way that we possibly can. If you're having surgery or you're, injured or in any other way, please let us know. We love you, as always. We want to let you know that, and we are definitely praying for you. We're in Job chapters 8 and 9 tonight. So if you haven't read Job chapters 8 and 9, please pause the video, go read Job chapters 8 and 9, and we will be ready to discuss that. Job chapter 8. You might remember the second friend of Job is speaking, Bildad. Bildad's major position is that God does not pervert justice. You remember we said that the friends, they usually have this major position. And Eliphaz, his was, there's no one righteous. So Job, if you're experiencing these things in your life, it's okay. You're human. And if you're a human, you can count on experiencing some bad things in your life because no one is righteous, Job, okay? But you can, Job, repent and everything will work out for you. Well, Bildad says, God doesn't pervert justice, okay? So if something bad is happening to you, it has to be because you've done something, Job. That's another thing that we find in Bildad's speeches. He's a very, very staunch believer in the doctrine of retribution. If the righteous, that is to say, the righteous are always blessed and the wicked are always punished. If reality speaks differently to that idea, it won't for long because God will quickly reverse that anomaly, I guess you could say. So if you see a wicked person that appears to be blessed, well, that's not going to happen for long. God will take care of that. Bildad, last week we stopped. He was talking about the teaching of the fathers. That's what he told Job. Job, you need to go back and listen to the teaching of the fathers. You need to set their teaching on your heart because, Job, maybe they say something that will help get you out of your current situation. You need to quit relying on personal experience, what you're experiencing in your own life, Job, because, we're like a shadow and we're gone. The elderly, they hold the highest form of earthly wisdom, Job. So go back to their teachings because they know what they're talking about. Well, we stopped there, and now Eliphaz is going to give another piece of evidence from nature to back up his claim that God does not pervert justice. And here's where he starts that. Job chapter 8, verse 11, he says, "Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant." What we know about papyrus is papyrus was a very important plant in the ancient world. I read a while back that, papyrus was somewhere between like 8 and 10 feet tall. But what we know about papyrus is papyrus only grows in hot, swampy environments that have a lot of water. Now, we know that papyrus, they stand very tall. Maybe that is alluding to the wicked. The wicked, they stand tall and they think that everything is all right with them. But what we learn from Job, especially Job chapter 8, what we learn from Bildad in his speech is that papyrus is dependent on something. Okay, the papyrus plant is dependent upon water because guess what? If a papyrus plant is fully grown and that water dries up, the papyrus will wither overnight and ultimately lose its value. It will be useless. The wicked, okay, the wicked and the righteous, we're all dependent on something. We're going to see more of that here in a minute. Job chapter 8, verse 13, "Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish." So these people that Bildad is talking about, who forget God. Okay, that's not like a lapse in their memory. Like, I think I remember hearing something about God, but I'm not so sure. I think I forgot about who God is. That's not it. This is like a willful decision by a person to not live for God and not care anything about His commandments. Those people, they have no hope. The wicked, well, we'll see that idea in a second. Let's go to verse 14 and 15. His confidence is severed and his trust is a spider's web. He leans against his house, but it does not stand. He lays hold of it, but it does not endure. What we know is we all place our trust in something. We have to. And whatever we place our trust in ultimately gives us our confidence in life. The righteous, we put our trust in God. And because we put our trust in God and we know that God is ultimately powerful and wise, all powerful and wise, we have great confidence. Well, the wicked, they have to put their trust in something. And if they're not going to put their trust in God, they have to put their trust in material possessions. So for the wicked person that thinks that they're going to live a life without God and they're going to be prosperous and successful, what we know is they have no hope in life, okay? That hope that they'll be prosperous and they will be successful, it's not going to happen because what they've put their trust in is very, very frail. It's like a spider's web. If you were falling to the ground and you saw a spider's web and you thought, I'll just grab onto that spider's web to brace myself, and not fall, that's not going to happen, okay? Because the spider's web is just going to break with your break when your hand grabs it and you're going to fall to the ground. That's how it is. If the wicked puts their trust in material things or in themselves, it's like they put their trust in a spider's web, and ultimately they have no confidence at all. Their confidence is severed. Well, then we go to verse 16, and these next few verses are very obscure. He is a lush plant before the sun, and his shoots spread over his garden. His roots entwine the stone heap. He looks upon a house of stones. If he is destroyed from his place, then it will deny him, saying, I have never seen you. Behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the spoil others will spring. Now this is what we want to focus on in verse 20. Behold, God will not reject a blameless man, nor take the hand of evil doers. Job, you need to understand this, buddy. God will not reject a blameless man. Now, we know from the prologue that Job is a blameless man. Job, you ought to take comfort if you really truly think you're innocent, because Job, let me tell you something. God's not going to take the hand of evildoers. It's not like Job, God is going to take their hand and just guide them along the best path in life and protect them and watch over them. That's not how it works, Job. Yet, verse 21, he will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Job, things are going to get better for you, my friend, okay? One day you're going to be filled with laughter again, Job. You're going to be filled with joy. This is like appealing to festival imagery here, like a person that hasn't been able to go to a religious festival in a long time. When they go back, they're very, very joyous and excited. That's how Bildad sees Job, especially if he repents, gets back on the right track. Verse 22, those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. That's a pretty powerful verse. There are people that are clearly mocking Job in his current state. Bildad says, okay, for the blameless, here's what's going to happen to those wicked people that mock you. They're the ones that are going to be clothed with shame. They're going to be the objects of God's judgment, Job. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. And then he says, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. The tent of the wicked, that might refer to their dwelling place, like their house, or it could refer to their offspring. So what we know is their current conditions aren't going to be good. That's what Bildad ultimately has to tell us. Job, though, has an answer for that. Now, what we're going to see in chapter 9 is we're going to see Job's agitation. Okay, he's very agitated with his inner thoughts. What we see in chapter 9 is Job focuses on an idea, and then he abandons that idea, and he goes to another idea, and then he'll ultimately abandon that idea, and he'll go to another idea, and he'll ultimately abandon that idea. Okay, he's looking for answers to his current situation, but he's not finding any. Well, what we also see in chapter 9 is we see many different types of language being used. We see legal language that's used. We see psalms of lament. We see hymns of praise. We see all these different things. What we ultimately see is that Job wants to go to court with God. We'll see that. So let's dig into it. Job chapter 9, we'll start in verse 1. Then Job answered and said, "Truly I know that it is so, but how can a man be in the right before God?" Now Job starts out by saying, "Truly I know that it is so." Well, what is it? Well, that seems to go back to Bildad's, you get the friends mixed up in your mind. It's terrible. But Bildad's major premise, that God does not pervert justice. So Job is acknowledging that. Okay, I'm not denying that, or at least he's not right now. Well, he then says, but how can a man be in the right before God? So it's like he takes Bildad's premise and he forms it into a question. Job is ultimately saying, no man's going to be. How is that? How can a man, win a case with God? Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's what Job had in mind. Like we said, he's struggling with his internal thoughts here. He knows that God is just, but he also knows that he is innocent. So he doesn't know what to do with that. So he starts to think about the unthinkable. Well, maybe if I could just take God to court, maybe I could just prove myself and prove to him that I am innocent and that he, well, if we follow that line of reasoning, we see where we'll end up. We'll go to verses 3 and 4. He said, "If one wished to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and succeeded?" We see here in verses 4 and 5 that Job's upset, okay? He's in despair because he can't argue with God, okay? He wants to go to court with God, but he says, if I go to court with God, God is, wise in heart and he's mighty in strength. Now, what we know in the ancient world is that there were two primary ways of resolving a dispute. One is you wrestled with a person. Maybe that's what Job had in mind when, he refers to the mighty in strength. But what Job really has in mind is taking God to court. Well, Job says, here's the problem with taking God to court. When you take God to court, God is wise in heart. Okay, you're not going to be able to answer God. You're not going to be able to answer his questions. Now, in the ancient world, when you sought to resolve a dispute by taking a person to court, well, the person that ultimately won was the person that reduced the other person to silence. That is, you explain your side, they explain their side, and then you cross-examine each other. And when you prove your case successfully, and you're successful in, providing a defense, and you move that person to silence where they just can't speak anymore, well, you've won. Job says that's not going to happen with God. God's too wise. He can outthink me. I'm not going to be able to do that. Now, what's interesting too is this last part of verse 4. Who has hardened himself against him and succeeded? Well, what does the who here refer to? Does it refer to the subject, that is a person, or does it refer to the direct object? Does it refer to God? So if it refers to the subject, then it's saying, even the most powerful and wise person couldn't go up against God. Or if it's referring to God, then it's well, it doesn't matter who you are in the world. God can, he's able to overtake you, or he's able to outsmart you. Job is bothered by this. Verse 5, He who removes mountains, and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble, who commands the sun, and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. And then he names some of these stars in verse 9, and he picks up in verse 11. Behold, he passes by me, and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? John Hartley, in his commentary, says that we can divide this section into 3 parts. You can divide the first section into verses 5 through 7, and that's nature's response to God's presence. And then you can further divide it into 8 through 10, which is God's might in creating the world. And then in verses 11 through 13, we see God's victory over all the foes. So what we see in verses 5 through 7, we'll read that again. He who removes mountains, and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble, who commands the sun, and it does not rise, who seals up the stars. So what we see is nature's reaction to God's presence. And when that happens, I mean, it's kind of scary in our minds a little bit, you know. God moves the mountains, and they don't even know it. Like, he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth out of its place. The sun, you know, isn't shining, doesn't rise. He seals up the stars from shining bright on the earth. It's kind of a terrifying image. Now, maybe this refers to like a volcano exploding and like the smoke rising up, where like you can't see the sun and you can't see the stars at night because of all the smoke and ash that's in the air. I don't know. What we know is that when God shows up, nature recognizes it when God shows up. We see 8 through 10. Says in verse 8, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. So God like stretches out the heavens like he's stretching out a canopy. And he does these things, and he's looking out, but it's still under his canopy that he's able to do these marvelous things with the earth. In verses 11 through 13, we read, behold, he passes by me, and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? What we learn here is that God rules over earthly and cosmic powers. Now, we're introduced to Rahab in verse 13. It says, God will not turn back his anger beneath him. Bowed the helpers of Rahab. Rahab is like Leviathan that we read about in the book of Job. It's this monster of chaos that lives in the depth of the sea, and we don't have time to talk about that, so we'll discuss that next week. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I can't wait to see everybody Sunday. God bless.